1 year after the Civil War ended, roughly 150 black men marched through the streets of New Orleans toward a political convention. They wanted the right to vote. The city's police were waiting for them, alongside ex-Confederate veterans and a white mob armed with pistols, clubs, and knives. By nightfall, dozens of those marchers were dead. And afterward, not a single person was arrested for killing them. This is the story of the New Orleans Massacre of 1866, the day a political meeting about black citizenship was crushed by the people who were supposed to keep the peace.
To understand how it happened, you have to understand what Louisiana looked like after the war. The Union captured New Orleans in 1862, earlier than most of the South. By 1864, Louisiana had a new state constitution that abolished slavery, but it did not give black men the right to vote. And when the war ended in 1865, former Confederates moved back into local power across the state. The new all-white legislature passed what were called black codes, laws that forced freed people into labor contracts, punished them for vagrancy if they refused, and bound many of them back to their former masters' plantations. Slavery was gone in name. In daily life, the old order was fighting to keep everything else the same.
In Washington, President Andrew Johnson was letting it happen. His version of Reconstruction was lenient. Former Confederate officials were being pardoned and restored to office. In New Orleans, that meant John T. Monroe, a Confederate sympathizer, was back as mayor, and Harry T. Hayes, an ex-Confederate general, was serving as sheriff. These were the men running the city's police. Black leaders in New Orleans had deep political roots. The city's free people of color and Afro-Creole community had been organizing for years through newspapers like the New Orleans Tribune and civic groups that pushed for equal rights. When Republican delegates proposed reconvening the 1864 Constitutional Convention to add black suffrage and strip the black codes, black New Orleanians mobilized to support it. On July 30th, 1866, delegates gathered at the Mechanics' Institute, a large public building in downtown New Orleans. About 150 black supporters, many of them Union Army veterans, formed a procession with a flag and a band and marched toward the building. At the corner of Common and Dryades Streets, a crowd of armed white men was waiting. Many were ex-Confederates. When the marchers arrived, shooting broke out. What happened next was not a fight. The marchers were largely unarmed. They scattered. Many ran for the Mechanics' Institute. And the police came, not to protect them, but to join the attack. Police officers smashed the building's windows and fired inside. People who tried to climb out were shot when they hit the ground. Men who dropped to their knees and begged for mercy were killed where they knelt. The convention's chaplain, Reverend Jotham Horton, was shot dead in the vestibule while weaving a white handkerchief. A.P. Dostey, a local dentist and abolitionist, was dragged into the street by 2 policemen, where the mob took turns beating, clubbing, and shooting him. As he lay dying, they threw his body into a cart and paraded it before cheering crowds. By the time federal troops arrived that evening and martial law was declared, the official count was 38 dead and 146 wounded. 34 of the dead were black. 119 of the wounded were black. Around 200 people had been arrested, almost all of them convention supporters, not their attackers. Nobody went to jail. Mayor Monroe's government treated the massacre as a justified response to an illegal convention. Southern newspapers called it a riot. But when General Philip Sheridan investigated, he used a different word. He reported to the War Department. It was no riot. It was an absolute massacre by the police, which was not excelled in murderous cruelty by that of Fort Pillow. It was a murder which the mayor and police of the city perpetrated without the shadow of a necessity. The massacre swept through northern newspapers. Coming just 2 months after a similar attack in Memphis, it became impossible for voters to ignore what was happening in the South. Andrew Johnson's policy of restoring former Confederates to power was producing exactly this: organized violence against black citizens trying to exercise political rights, carried out with the cooperation of local government. In the 1866 midterm elections, radical Republicans won a commanding majority in Congress. The following year, they passed the Reconstruction Acts over Johnson's veto, placing former Confederate states under military districts and requiring new constitutions that guaranteed black male suffrage. The marchers who walked toward the Mechanics' Institute that afternoon were not naive. Many of them had fought in the Union Army. They knew the risks. They went anyway because they believed the right to vote was the difference between real freedom and a new kind of captivity. What happened to them forced the country to confront the gap between ending slavery and protecting the people it had freed. In New Orleans, the old order did not simply resist black political power. It used the police, the street, and the city government to make that power dangerous to claim.